Hi, my name is Yvonne, and welcome to Wing It with Thought, where everyday life meets scripture. Today, I want to talk to the quiet ones, the ones that are always in the background, the ones that say, I'm not a leader, I'm not a speaker, I just sit quietly in the background, I don't make the decisions. If that's you, this one is for you. This idea that we sometimes carry, that if I don't have a strong opinion, then I'm not really responsible. But scripture has a different view about the crowd, for better or for worse. We'll start off with the craving crowd in the wilderness, Numbers 11. Israelites were free, but they were missing Egypt. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost, they said. The crowd's grumbling spread like wildfire, and it wore down Moses, and it stirred anger in God. What began as a craving became the culture and nearly cost them their promise. Let's reflect. Have you ever found yourself longing for the comforts of something that God has already delivered you out of? That's what the crowd did. Normalize the wrong appetite. The second story is from 1 Samuel chapter 4, the presumptuous crowd that summons the ark. There was a time that the Israelites were losing battle, and somebody had a bright idea to summon the Ark of the Covenant as a good luck charm. The crowd cheered, and the enemies were terrified. But God wasn't impressed, because they didn't seek him. They merely summoned him. And what was the result of this? They lost the battle and the ark was captured, symbolizing the departure of God from their midst. Let's reflect on this one. Do we sometimes cheer for something that might seem spiritual but isn't quite submitted? The crowd all shouted God's name, but they didn't actually capture his heart. The third story is also from 1 Samuel chapter 8. The crowd that wanted to conform and demanded a king. There was that moment the people said, "We want a king." Samuel warns them, "A king will take your freedom. A king will take your children. A king will take your fields. A king will take taxes." The crowd still said, "We want to be like everybody else." God gave them a king, King Saul. Let's reflect on this. Popular doesn't always symbolize prophetic. Sometimes the crowd might be pushing for something that looks good, and you all end up regretting it. How are the taxes going? Fourth story is a very sobering one, and it comes from Luke 23. The crowd that shouted, "Crucify him." The crucifixion of Jesus. Pilate offered a choice: Jesus or Barabbas. The crowd chose the murderer and shouted, "Crucify him." Some of the people had seen Jesus perform miracles, some of them had heard his word. But they either stood in silence or, even worse, shouted, "Crucify him." The reflection: sometimes standing in silence in the face of injustice says a lot. The final story is from Numbers 13 to 14, the rebellious crowd that refused to enter the promised land. God had brought them to the edge of the promised land, but the spies that they had sent came back fearful, and the people believed the spies over the voice of God, and they refused to go in. So God judged that generation. The only people that made it through that promised land were Joshua and Caleb that stood against the crowd. Let's reflect on that one. This is a sobering reminder that fear can paralyze you, and also what the united front might put across might not always be the right thing. So what does all this mean for us? For me, it means you just can't be part of the crowd. Your presence, your voice, your actions, they shape the moment. You can push through the crowd like the woman that only needed to touch the cloak of Jesus. She was weak, She wasn't clean, she wasn't seen, but she reached out. The crowd didn't stop her. She didn't need a spotlight. She just needed Jesus, and that was enough. So if you feel like you're part of the crowd, the ones in the background, make sure that you're the kind type of crowd. The kind that stands for truth even when it seems hard. The kind that don't just cheer because everybody is doing it. Kind that follows the voice of God and not the volume of the crowd. I call you to reflect on this moment. Am I following the crowd or am I following Christ? Because the two aren't always going in the same direction. If this stirred something in you, I'd love it if you could share, perhaps to somebody that feels like they're in the background with the crowd. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe for more reflections like this. Thank you for watching, and remember, you're not just part of the crowd. You are part of God's story that's still being written.